100 hours of vision, 600 hours of audio. How did you sort of knuckle down and find that focus to get through all this?
Well, it wasn't, it wasn't in my mind at the beginning, because I had to keep a very open mind and actually just watch all the film and hear all the audio before I could even really think about how to do it. And Jabez Olsen, who cut it with me, just the two of us, really sat in the room for days. I mean, it takes quite a long time to listen to 600 hours of audio, I discovered. It depends on how long your days are, but we would go through it, and we were sort of listening to it just by, not having really a sense of exactly what we were going to do. Because that's really what we can't dictate this story. It was, it's the guys, their experiences, so we have to learn about that. But then every time we heard something that we thought was, kind of really interesting, we'd clip it out and put it into a bin. So we ended up with a bin of 4 or 5 hours of sort of the very best bits that we heard on the way through. And then at that point we had to figure out what story we were going to tell. And there was different ideas that we discussed, but at the end of the day it seemed the easiest thing, because you want it to be just about the guys and their experiences. You don't want to impose anything on it that's going to just detract. So just start at the beginning of the war, go through and finish at the end, and tell the human experience, not the politics or the tactics. And that was really where we ended up. But we didn't end up there until we'd heard everything and got a real sense from the interviews what we had available to us.
So listening to those interviews, just how massive an undertaking was this emotionally? Because watching the movie, hearing these things just the once was harrowing, but you would have had to have listened to so many of these accounts so many times in order to pick them out.
It's interesting. One of the things that I think the emotion, that your experience comes a little bit from the fact we've taken all the bits and put them together and put sound effects into. Some of these interviews were 10 or 12 hours long. One guy, just sitting in a room being interviewed. So certainly those were, and you know what's actually interesting is that they weren't emotional. I mean, the understanding of what they went through, when you see it sort of cut together in a movie, it certainly brings an emotion to it. But when you listen to them, what I admired about these guys, is how pragmatic they were. They don't want our sympathy, so they weren't being emotional, hoping that we'd feel sorry for them on these tapes. There was only one guy in the 600 hours. There was only one guy whose voice cracked up. And I originally thought that I'm not going to use him because he started to get upset. But then Jabez, who I was cutting it with, was really affected by it. As a guy that had to shoot, the British soldier had to shoot his friend, and he said, "Oh no, this is fantastic. You've got to put it in." And I said, "Okay." So we actually that's the only time in 600 hours that any of these guys actually choked up. They were they were pragmatic.
So because the film was quite visceral, pulls no punches in the details, from things like trench foot to latrines.
The First World War.
How important was it to get all of that stuff in?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it was difficult to actually decide. It took us a while to figure the film out, and we really ended up with just being a British soldier's experience on the Western Front. So we don't have any flying, any navy. There's no home front. There's no women making shells in the factories, which is a great story. Nursing, shell shock, Gallipoli, Mesopotamia. There's so many really important, and the colonial story of the colonial troops coming in. So many aspects of the First World War that need to be told, but. I mean, it would be a 12-hour movie. Not that I'm against doing 12-hour films, of course, but we didn't have the budget for that. So we had to really drill down onto one specific sort of area, which was a British infantry experience. So that really, and that was surprising how common the experience was. That was what I wanted the film to be. I didn't want to use people that had one particular story to tell of what happened to them on the Friday night when they did this sort of thing, and no one else actually experienced it. I didn't want to use those types of stories, although there's lots and lots of really, really funny stories, that certain soldiers experienced. But I wanted to use stuff that was more general and generic, that all these guys went through pretty much the same experience. And they often, what you hear in the movie is there, but I could probably, everything that's in the movie, I could probably give you 10 other guys who are saying something very, very similar. So we ended up just using the person that said it the best.
And technologically, reading, so it was coloured, and then it was touched up, and it was converted into stereoscopic 3D. How does all of that work technologically? Because from a Philistine's perspective, how does it?
Well, we get what the Imperial War Museum sends us over the net. Over the net, it sends us a 2K scan of its original 35mm film. So the film doesn't even leave their vaults. They scan it over in the UK, and then they can email that or sort of sits in on over the net. And so that arrives here at Park Road, and then Park Road worked out the restoration of what's the black and white footage. I mean, the colour is a little icing on the cake, which was done in the States, but the real hard work was restoring the black and white. It's from bad black and white to good black and white. It's actually way more difficult than going from black and white to a colour, which is just a labour-intensive process, but it's something that we know about. But we didn't know about how to restore this footage, and so we had to take away grain, we had to take scratches out, we had to adjust contrast, we had to obviously adjust the speeds, which was shot all over the place. A reel of film, a 10-minute reel would have some shots would be 13 frames a second, some would be 15, some would be 17, some would be 10, and you can't actually adjust a shot to normal speed, which is 24 frames, without knowing what the original speed was, which obviously we don't know. But we came pretty good at being able to guess it. We could see a shot and say, oh yeah, that looks like it's 13 frames a second. And we'd do it at 13 frames to 24, and sometimes we'd be right or we'd be wrong, and then we just slow it down and speed it up. So all that was a manual labour thing by eye. And getting rid of the grain, it was just a lot of different processes, not one thing. It's a pipeline. It starts here, it goes into this department, this, and it comes out as a really pristine, beautiful black and white image.
And so what sort of pressures were there getting it ready in time for 2018, for the centenary of the end of the war?
Wouldn't want to miss the armistice. It would be. Sorry, it's not going to be ready till February next year. No, it was not an option, as they say. It was pressured. It didn't seem like at the time, because the first meeting I had with the Imperial War Museum to discuss it was 4 years ago. So that's the armistice felt a long way away, just as the war was 4 years long. But anyway, during those 4 years, we had to work out the restoration process. We then had to listen to all the footage. We had to, all the tapes, and we had to look at all the footage. We had to decide where to restore it. And the editing, which Jabez and I have been editing it for months and months and months. It's actually been a very intensive editing job. And partly it's been tricky too, because it was originally going to be a 30-minute film, and then it became a 60-minute film, and then it became a feature film. So it was always changing, and the deadline was getting closer and closer. And I think, it jumped from being a 60-minute film, because we had so much great material. And, we could have cut it down to 60 minutes, but it was like, well, I think it jumped from being 60 minutes to 90 minutes, like in the last two weeks or something, before we finished it. It took everyone by surprise. But it just demanded it, and fortunately, our producer, Claire, managed to fit it in with our original budget, which is good.
When you think of old series like The World at War, these are still being studied in classrooms around the world 50 years on. Is it your hope that something like this does sort of take up that sort of mantle as well?
Well, because it's financed by the British taxpayer, it's essentially through 1418 now, which is their sort of centenary arts program. It's actually one of the mandates that they have is that a copy of it's going to go into every single British school. So to answer your question, it's a copy going into every single British school. If it's not there already, it'll be going in there soon. So it's likely to become quite widely seen by British school kids.
So, for the perspective of you as a labour of love, you're doing this at the end of it, dedicating it to your grandfather. There's 114 voices in there. Is the hope that everyone sees these as documents of real people?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I wanted to take them from the filter of age, 100 years old of film damage, because a lot of what you see in the black and white World War I film, and you see it's not what was originally shot. I mean, it was shot. A lot of it is 100 years worth of wear and tear and neglect and aging. A lot of when you see one of these old films today, that wasn't really what it was like the day it was shot. It was actually, it's inherited all this scratches and jumping and jerkiness and splices and all this stuff, which was not there originally. So it's amazing when you actually get rid of all that artifice, all the damage, all the 100 years of damage. And also, most of the films have been duplicated, so we're not working with the original thing that was in the camera. We're working with it's been copied two or three times. So we're trying to get that third generation copy to look like the original camera neg that was shot on the Western Front. So that was our job, and once you do that, I think you are seeing real people. Your faces come alive. And slowing the speeds down to a normal speed, you suddenly see gestures and body language and little moves, and they move the same as we do. But you recognise what they're doing. This guy's shifting his feet because he's kind of a little bit nervous, or this guy. You actually can. So suddenly all this body language comes alive too, which you just don't see at all when it's all sped up.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're very, very welcome. Thank you. That's great. We're very welcome.